Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the strength-based warrior type classes in D&D. Specifically, we're going to be talking about what has changed from the 2014 version of these classes to the 2024 version. I'm going to be going over 3 classes: the Barbarian, the Fighter, and the Paladin. We're going to go level by level with a fine-tooth comb to figure out what exactly is different about them. But before we get into that, my UPWORK and my Patreon are live, so go check those out. If you want early access to my content and access to my suggestion box, go and check out my Patreon. And if you're interested in graphic design, marketing, and more, go check out my UPWORK. And if you want to play D&D with me as your DM, head on over to startplaying.games and check out all of the campaigns I have up there. I have 2 ongoing sandbox games on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, and those are going to be bi-weekly and set in my homebrew world. And then I also have on Thursday a Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos game that is weekly. All of those are pending until they have enough players, so join now. Additionally, I just launched my fairy tale inspired one-shot, The Enchanted Forest, which is perfect for new players, and you can check out all the available dates on startplaying.games. So let's get into it. First of all, I'm not going to be covering subclasses in this video because then this video would be really long. I did a video doing an initial flip through of the new player's handbook, and in that video I listed off all of the subclasses that are available, so go check that out if you haven't seen it. I'm saving a more in-depth review of the subclasses for their own video. So this video is just going to be about the classes in general. So without further ado, let's look at Barbarians. Because I haven't found anything to rage about with this new version. Boo! I mentioned in my last video that they cut out a lot of the flavor text, but I love that they added this part for Barbarians. Barbarians are mighty warriors who are powered by primal forces of the multiverse that manifest as a rage. More than a mere emotion, and not limited to anger, this rage is an incarnation of a predator's ferocity, a storm's fury, and a sea's turmoil. I love that they didn't specify that it has to be anger anymore. That's something I always thought was weird about the wild magic barbarian, because to me, they never seemed angry. They just have this magical rage that they go into. Of course, that subclass isn't in this book, so whatever. All of the Barbarians' proficiencies and skills are exactly the same as they used to be. All of the classes have also had their starting gear overhauled, so we're going to be covering that as we go through these classes. But Barbarians now get a Great Axe, 4 Hand Axes, an Explorer's Pack, and 15 gold pieces, or 75 gold pieces. I do feel like this kind of shoehorns Barbarians into being axe users. Obviously, they could just take that 75 gold pieces and buy whatever weapons they want, but it's just kind of a little weird. I sort of liked that the old one had what it was going to give you, but it also was like you could swap this weapon out for another martial weapon. And I think a lot of new players got confused by that, and that's why they made this change. But I think that that's something that I just liked better in the 2014 version. The first thing is Barbarians get a couple of these weapon masteries that they've added for the 2024 version. We talked about weapon mastery a little bit in the player's handbook flip-through video, so go check that out. But I'm assuming all of the classes that we're talking about today, since they're martial classes, are going to be getting these weapon masteries. Barbarians start with 2 of them, and then they get another one at level 4 and another one at level 10. Rage damage is still the same as it was before, and the number of rages is still the same, except when you get to level 20, you no longer have unlimited rages, which is As for the rage itself, they've updated the language a lot, but it seems to be pretty similar, other than the fact that you can now use unarmed strikes and get your rage damage. Which I think is great, and that makes me think about doing like a barbarian/monk multi-class. Anyways, I think that they did a good job rewording the rage section, other than this one thing that confused me for a minute. They used to say that your rage lasted 1 minute and it would end early if you hadn't attacked an enemy. Now they've changed it so that your rage lasts until the end of your next turn, and you can extend it by attacking somebody. It's basically a semantic difference. And if you keep extending your rage in this way, you can now rage for up to 10 minutes. So at first glance, it appears that the rage is much shorter, but it's actually 10 times longer. Unarmored defense and reckless attack are still the exact same that they used to be. Danger sense, which you get at level 2, is actually a lot better now because they used to specify that you had to see the attack coming, which means that you couldn't use danger sense if you were blinded or deafened. But in the 2024 version, you don't have to see it coming anymore. At level 5, they still get the extra attack and fast movement as they always have. They've made 2 changes at level 7. First of all, they got rid of the second paragraph of Feral Instinct that says, additionally, if you are surprised at the beginning of combat and aren't incapacitated, you can act normally on your first turn, but only if you enter your rage before doing anything else. That's gone. But instead they've added this instinctive pounce feature. which says that as a part of the bonus action you take to enter your rage, you can also move up to half your speed. I think it's a fair trade-off, but I think that was something that was cool about Barbarians before, is if you were surprised, you kind of didn't have to be. But I also don't really use surprise very much in my games, because I think players generally find it to be bullshit. At level 9, they've replaced Brutal Critical with Brutal Strike. So now, rather than just having an extra dice whenever you get a critical hit, you have this kind of more complicated ability with a few effects that you can choose from. Basically, if you reckless attack, you don't have a disadvantage, and you forego your advantage on the attack. You can either use Forceful Blow to push them away from you, or Hamstring Blow to reduce their speed. At level 11, they get Relentless Rage, and it's mostly the same. If a Barbarian drops to 0 hit points while raging and they aren't killed outright, they can make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. If they succeed, they used to drop to 1 hit point instead of 0, but now they drop to an amount of hit points equal to twice your Barbarian level, which is kind of a lot, especially when you consider that it used to be 1. At level 13, they get Improved Brutal Strike, which is going to give them a couple more options for effects. At level 15, they still get Persistent Rage, except it's completely different. It used to be that your rage ends early only if you fall unconscious or choose to end it. This also seemingly left a loophole where you could just throw on some heavy armor after you start raging, but that doesn't work. But the new version goes out of its way to specify that you cannot wear heavy armor. And it still kind of does the same thing, but instead of your rage not ending early, you just don't need to extend it. It just lasts the 10 minutes. They also added this paragraph that when you roll initiative, you regain all of your uses of rage. At level 17, they get another improved Brutal Strike, except this time it's just going to increase the damage. Indomitable Might at level 18 used to apply only to strength checks, now it also applies to strength saving throws. And like all classes, Barbarians now get an epic boon at level 19, and the one that they recommend is the boon of Irresistible Offense. And then as they always have, at level 20, they get Primal Champion, which is going to increase both their strength and constitution scores. Although this used to be to a maximum of 24, and it's now 25. So that's it for Barbarians. I'm most excited about the Brutal Strike. I think that gives Barbarians a little more to work with, but I've just kind of always thought Barbarians are cool, so let's take a swing at Fighters. The proficiencies and skills are all the same, except they have Persuasion added to their list of skills. Like with Barbarians, they don't get a ton of flexibility on their starting gear, but they do actually have one extra option. Option A seems to be the more strength-based option. You get Chainmail, a Greatsword, a Flail, 8 Javelins, a Dungeoneer's Pack, and 4 gold. And then Option B seems to be the more dexterity-based fighter option, which gives you studded leather armor, a scimitar, a short sword, a longbow, 20 arrows, which I never make my players count their ammunition anyways, a quiver, a Dungeoneer's Pack, and 11 gold, or Option C is just 155 gold pieces. You still get a fighting style at level 1 as you always have, but like I mentioned in my previous video, they've moved that section to the feats section, instead of listing it out in every class. So let's talk Second Wind, because it's basically every fighter's favorite ability, and they've made it a lot more integral to the class. Instead of just using it once and then you need to take a rest before you're able to use it again, you now have 2 uses. When you take a short rest, you get 1 back. When you take a long rest, you get all of them back. And the number of times that you can use Second Wind goes up as you level up, and they have that listed on the table over here. It goes to 3 uses at level 4 and 4 uses at level 10. As I predicted, fighters also get Weapon Mastery. They get to choose 3 weapons at level 1, 4 at level 4, 5 at level 10, and 6 at level 16. And obviously this is more than Barbarians get. At second level, fighters get Action Surge like they always have, and it's all the same except now you can't use this extra action to take the magic action. So this seems like a bit of a downside for Eldritch Knights, but we'll address that more in the subclass video. They get a new feature at level 2 called Tactical Mind. When you fail an ability check, you can expend a use of your Second Wind to push yourself towards success. Rather than regaining hit points, you roll a d10 and add the number rolled to the ability check, potentially turning it into a success. If the check still fails, the use of Second Wind isn't expended. So that last bit makes this really cool because you could theoretically just be using this all the time and you only actually have to expend your use of Second Wind if it works. At level 5, they still get their extra attack as they normally used to. And they also get this new ability, Tactical Shift, which whenever you activate your Second Wind with the bonus action, you can move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. You still get Indomitable at level 9, which lets you reroll a saving throw that you failed. It's the same as before, except that now when you reroll it, you get a bonus equal to your fighter level. Especially at the higher levels, that's game-changing. Additionally, at level 9 you get Tactical Master. Remember those weapon properties that we talked about? If you attack with a weapon whose mastery property you can use, you can replace that property with the Push, Sap, or Slow property for that attack. So basically you're just like even better with your weapons. At level 11 you go up to 2 extra attacks for a total of 3. And I like that this book separates out those extra attacks into level 5 extra attack, level 11 2 extra attacks, rather than before where under extra attack there was another paragraph that said this is going to increase at this level and this level. I just think that this makes leveling up easier. And then at level 13 they added this ability, Studied Attacks. You study your opponents and learn from each attack you make. First of all, I think this is cool because players always want to do stuff like that where they like see their enemy's weaknesses. And normally I just make them roll an insight check, and then depending on how well they do, I might tell them, oh, they have resistances or whatever. Except, the mechanics for this ability, I don't really do that. It's still cool, but this is what it actually does. If you make an attack roll against a creature and miss, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. Which is also good because it really sucks when a player's just spiraling and they keep missing every single turn, and then they're just like bored throughout the whole combat because they've done nothing. Of course, at level 19, they get their epic boon like everybody else, and their recommended choice is the Boon of Combat Prowess. And then at level 20, you have your 4 attacks, which was always the case, but again, this book actually separates that into its own entry. Overall, I love how they based the class a little more around the Second Wind feature. I think it does a lot to make this whole class feel a little more cohesive. I mean, I think fighters probably have the weakest concept out of any class. In my mind, you have to work a lot harder to make a fighter interesting, whereas other classes like Barbarian and Paladin already have a lot of flavor just baked into the class. But where fighters make up for this is that they're strong as fuck. And this new 2024 version seems to have doubled down on that. Should I be a fighter? I kinda want to. But only if I can use this version. Last but not least, let's shine some light on Paladins. Their proficiencies and everything are still the same, so we'll go right to the starting equipment. They now get chainmail, a shield, a long sword, 6 javelins, holy symbol, a priest's pack, and 9 gold, or 150 gold. Is that enough to buy plate armor? Can you just like start out with plate armor? Oh no, it's not. That's not nearly enough. No, you can't. Divine Sense is gone at level 1. At first I thought they just removed it, but it's actually hidden in here, so we're just going to circle back to that. Paladins actually now get their spellcasting at level 1 instead of level 2, so I think that kind of makes up for the loss of Divine Sense. And speaking of spellcasting, this is the first class that I have reviewed that has a spell list, so let's look at that. The first thing I immediately noticed when looking at the spellcasting here is that instead of preparing spells equal to your charisma modifier plus half of your paladin level rounded down, but you have to have a minimum of 1, they just tell you on this chart how many spells to prepare. And this is another example of how I keep saying that this book is way more newbie friendly. Just look at the chart, pick that many spells. But let's look at the actual spell lists. The first level paladin spells are exactly the same. For level 2, it seems that they've just replaced Branding Smite with this new spell Shining Smite, and they've added Prayer of Healing and Warding Bond, which used to be just cleric spells. For levels 3 and 4, it's exactly the same. And then at level 5, they've added Greater Restoration and Summon Celestial. The spell slots on the chart are basically all the same, except for the 2 spell slots that you start at level 1 with now. So let's look at the Paladin's features, starting at level 1 with Lay on Hands. It's now a bonus action instead of an action, which I think is good, because most players don't want to use their action to heal another player. The one weird thing about Lay on Hands is you can't use it to cure diseases anymore, which I guess makes sense because they don't really have rules for diseases as far as I know. At first I thought Paladins just didn't get Weapon Mastery, but it turns out they get 2 types of Weapon Mastery at level 1, and that's it. They never get any more. At level 2 they get a fighting style like they always have, and I mentioned before that they switched all these to being in their own chapter instead of listed out, except Paladins get 1 extra choice, the Blessed Warrior. And this is just going to give them 2 cleric cantrips, which is good because Paladins don't ordinarily get cantrips. At level 2 they get Paladin Smite. This is going to make them always have Divine Smite prepared, and they can cast it once per long rest without using a spell slot. Cool. At level 3, Paladins get Channel Divinity, and this used to be something that was tied exclusively to your subclass, but now you get Channel Divinity through being a Paladin. And what did they add as the Channel Divinity option that all Paladins get regardless of subclass? Divine Sense. So all Paladins at level 3 have Divine Sense and another Channel Divinity option based on their subclass. You get 2 uses of Channel Divinity instead of the 1 that you used to get, and you get 3 uses starting at level 11. Channel Divinity now works the same way that Second Wind does, in that when you take a short rest, you get 1 use back, and when you take a long rest, you get all of your uses back. We'll cover all of the Channel Divinity options when we go through the Paladin subclasses. But for now, let's look at Divine Sense. The old Divine Sense was an action, it's now a bonus action, which is kinda cool, but Divine Sense in my games is usually used outside of combat. I didn't know this, but the old version actually specified that they couldn't be behind total cover, which is something that I did not know and have never used that rule in my games. But it no longer specifies that, so now you can use it to identify hidden Celestials, Fiends, or Undead. Which is nice, but I thought it was always like that. They removed Divine Health, which used to make Paladins immune to disease, but I always thought that was weird anyways, so goodbye. Paladins still get their extra attack at level 5, but they also get Faithful Steed, which is going to make them always have the Find Steed spell prepared, and then once per long rest they can cast it without using a spell slot. Cool, I guess. I always think features like this are so weird. I would have just prepared the spell, but okay, thanks. At level 6 they still get Aura of Protection. They reworded the fuck out of it, but it still works the same way. They added Abjure Foes at level 9, which is a magic action that for some reason is not a Channel Divinity option, even though you expend a use of your Channel Divinity to use it, and it basically allows you to try to frighten targets. While frightened, they can only move, take an action, or take a bonus action. And I like this ability, I just don't know why it's not a Channel Divinity ability. But anyways, at level 10 they get Aura of Courage, which they changed in 2 ways. First of all, they tied it to the Aura of Protection instead of just giving it the same range, which I think is good, more cohesive, all that good stuff. And second of all, they added that a frightened ally can come into your aura and stop being affected by being frightened. It doesn't actually remove the condition, just makes it not affect them. At level 11, instead of Improved Divine Smite, you now get Radiant Strikes, which basically does the same thing, they just renamed it mostly. And then at level 14, instead of Cleansing Touch, you get Restoring Touch, which lets you use Lay on Hands to remove conditions. At level 18, they get Aura Expansion, which expands your Aura of Protection out to 30 feet. This is nothing new, but again, in this book, they've separated out these things, instead of just saying under Aura of Protection that when you get to level 18, it's going to increase in range. I just think it makes it so much easier. You just look at the level that you are and the features there. And like everybody else, Paladins get their epic boon at level 19. Their recommended choice is the Boon of True Sight. And that's it on those 3 classes. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing videos specifically about the subclasses for each class. But first, I'm going to be doing videos similar to this one, reviewing all of the other classes in this new 2024 version. Next week, I'll be covering the Scoundrels. This is going to be your Bards, your Rangers, your Rogues. So if you're interested in any of that, subscribe and ring that bell so that you get notifications every time I post. And tell me, what are your thoughts on the new 2024 rules so far? Do you think you'll be playing as a Barbarian, Fighter, or Paladin? Drop your answers in the comments below, and I will see you next week.